instead of this other bullshit. And I've got like nothing in a way. I don't know, my brain's just so scrambled from everything or what, but I just can't like, oh yeah, that sounds fun, or yeah, that, or commit fully to
It's because of the stress.
anything.
We started, by the way.
Oh, well, hey everybody.
Hey, guys. Sometimes I like to surprise start the podcast. So what are you saying? You're trying to find like something to keep you busy or just like a new hobby or what?
Well, a little of both, you fill so much of your time with this particular life you built or whatever it might be, from just daily tasks to things you need to get done to certain people, and then boom, it's all gone, and now it's like discombobulating, and it's whoa. And that, I think that's part of the shock of that kind of situation is your time was filled with all this, and now that stuff's all just gone, and you got to fill it with something else. And just finding the motivation or the clarity to go, yes, that, or yes, that, and make a decision and commit to it.
It's the time. It's the time.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you have time. Mm-hmm. And like you say, you're not used to the time. It's funny because when you don't have the time,
you bitch about not having the time.
You bitch about not having the time, but actually it's like anything. You've got to transition into it, I think.
Yeah.
I kind of, experience the same thing where, I'm trying to create routines, right? Because, routines make for successful people, situations, all that stuff.
Good habits to have.
Right. And it's hard to, it's not necessarily hard to start a new routine, but it's hard to adjust to a new routine, I would say. Because I've started back up an old routine again, and I just feel like it's making me more tired when it should be doing the opposite, which is, making me have more energy throughout the day.
Right.
But like, I don't know.
Is that what you experienced in the past when you did it?
I can't remember. I remember being like stressed and stuff and thinking to myself, or I got some information from somewhere, a podcast or a book or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, let me try that. And it was a good transition. I don't remember it making me more tired. I remember the overall result was good, was like, more energy. Right. You know what I mean? I had more energy throughout the day and stuff like that. And that was just basically getting up and doing some sort of exercising in the morning, primarily like yoga. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because with the back problems I have and stuff, that is a huge deal, But when you're going through stuff in life, whoops, look at that. That's a podcast faux pas.
Rookie.
I know. Forgot to turn the phone off.
Well, did you begin this just because of the physical elements, or was there mental noise as well?
You mean from before?
Yeah.
Well, there's all kinds of mental noise. There still is a bunch of mental noise.
Right.
It's an adjustment to have, like the similarities that we have. And, we don't really need to beat around the bush. But both of us were, as we talked about in podcast 1, both of us are in long-term relationships. And then all of a sudden, those relationships changed. And so we were both living with somebody for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden we're not living with somebody.
Right.
So it's a big change. And in my situation, as I, mentioned before, I'm sure, is that, we're still in a relationship, where some of the parameters and things have changed. We're trying to do it in a healthy way, but it's still a big change. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I find that what I'm trying to figure out is like, I know it's weird because I intellectually know things I can do and mindsets I can take, and I can intellectualize what is happening to me. But creating that space between what is happening to me and the emotion of it, mm-hmm. right, mm-hmm. is proving to be difficult. So, it's like getting irritated at little things. I find myself to be way more irritated at stuff, whether it's other people, when I'm driving, I find myself complaining out loud a lot more recently, or I'm at least I'm noticing it more.
I think I can relate to that. I think it's just the totality of everything compiled on top of each other. For me, at least, the the stress to whatever anxiety there might be at some point or another. Well, for me, in being in limbo, not knowing what comes next in a way.
Yeah, but don't you feel like, isn't there a part of you that's like, well, what comes next is whatever you want to have come next?
Yeah, no, I mean for sure. Like you're saying, intellectually, I know that to be a truth, but systematically, you're putting that into action at the moment seems like a task I'm just not able to tackle at the moment.
These are all like things. This reminds me of what we were talking about earlier, like the podcast I heard today, where they were talking about artificial intelligence and things like that, and how, potentially like an AI is going to have like, be super efficient and can improve upon itself exponentially and stuff like that. But what it more than likely won't have is the ability, it's not going to have hunger. It's
Right.
not going to have being tired,
Loneliness and
and those are like drivers.
those are motivators.
Motivators
for
yeah.
sure.
Hunger's the
Yeah.
motivator. I mean, just on a base level. So it's those things that are essential and make us human, but at the same time, they're also like the biggest pitfalls.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of stuff that we talked about this before. There's a bunch of stuff that we have, evolutionarily speaking, tendencies and reactions that we have that served an evolutionary purpose, but they don't feel a need anymore because we don't live on the plains of Africa, and we're not running from lions and tigers and bears and stuff like that. You
Oh
know what I
my.
mean? Yeah. So, and then we're left with how to deal with it. But on the flip side of that, the gentleman, I think his name was Sean Carroll, was talking about how we'll look back in human history and probably look at from like the early 1900s, 1920s ish until 2000, 2100 or somewhere in there as probably the most unique and important time in human history
Transformational for sure.
because we created industry and technology, and we are building and creating things so fast that we don't know what the long-term effects of those things are going to be. I mean, they're literally rewiring our brain. I mean, even before smartphones, right? Like when I was in high school, I got way into like mechanical drafting, and that's what I wanted to do was do some sort of architectural mechanical drafting and stuff. And it was all board drafting.
Right.
In the where you're actually drawing it, and then halfway through high school we transitioned into CAD, so computer stuff. And I can remember, years later, I'd be writing something or sketching something on a piece of paper, and I would draw a line the wrong way, and the reflex of my brain was Control Z, which is undo.
Undo, yeah.
Right. And so I mean, I can't speak for we as a whole. But I've noticed that being at a computer all the time, most of my career, that on that reflex, my brain is actually thinking a command that I would do on the computer to copy or paste or undo.
Right,
It's usually
right.
undo, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I find it humorous when I'm sketching something, or I'm writing in pen and Control Z, that won't work here.
Right. Right.
So.
Or Control Alt Z, and you just keep going back and back and back and back.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff with how we are evolving, and I think that all those things obviously have an effect on the state of mind that we're talking about, right? If you're sitting at home alone, you've gone through a transition, and there's that time now you're talking about. Well, you have these things, these devices that you can fill your time with, but it's like which works. It's their distractions.
Yeah, that's all they are.
Yeah. I mean, I always go back to Eckhart Tolle when he would talk about, I think it was in The Power of Now, he talked about being above thought and below thought.
Right.
And being below thought would be like altering your state with
Being drunk
or on drugs,
Yeah.
or just sitting down in front of a television and just vegging out. That's below thought.
Right.
And being above thought was things like, creating new experiences, trying meditating, things that took you away from the thinking mind. There, because the thinking mind is a trap,
Right.
at times, and you can drop below the thinking mind. Let's say being drunk, and then you're an idiot and you do stupid things, right? Or you can do stupid things, but you're removed from the thinking mind, in a way. Or you can be above thought, and that's where there's space from the thinking mind as well. And that's what you talked about before, where that podcast where we talked about actions, thinking before you act, right? That's above thought, in my opinion, because you're actually, creating a space between the thought and the action,
Right.
to basically, as he put it in his books, The Power of Now and A New Earth, watch the thinker.
Right.
And that's a hard concept I think it's a hard concept to grasp. And when you have the experiences of watching the thinker, without going into too much detail of what that means, it's pretty interesting because it's a practice and you can get good at it. But it's crazy to think about people and how even having the concept that there's something more than there's something above or beyond what you think of your mind. We think that's the end all be all, but it's not.
I know.
It's not the end all be all.
Well,
at
that's, in my opinion, that's part of the bigger picture, quote unquote, problem as a society, as a human race. Is those blinders again. We're all locked right here,
Yeah.
in what we think and what we feel, and accept that as ultimate truth and just grab it, hold on to it, and run.
So what do you think overall, like the state of human beings and where we're going? Not necessarily environmentally and politically and all that bullshit that gets so tiring to hear all the time everywhere around you, but like if you were to if someone were to ask you to, if you were to give real simple, Roman times, a thumbs up or thumbs down on the direction of the human race, what would you give it?
It'd be both. I mean, it depends what you're talking. Like as far as technologically speaking, and the resources and ability that will come down the pike. I mean, thumbs up for sure. I mean, technology's improved our lives in so many ways already, and it's only growing exponentially faster and faster every year. But as far as mental health shit goes, I think it's going in a bad direction. It's a consumer world. It's a throwaway world. It's consume. I mean, this shit's thrown in our face from your Google cookies to your ads. I mean, it's just constantly you're being bombarded with this crap nonstop.
Well, look at it this way. What do you think of this? So, if this is no different. Okay, that's a pretty common perspective, and there's a movement out there for people to move away from technology. I mean, you see it even in entertainment, right?
Yeah.
All the Alaska shows, right?
Yeah.
All the sustenance shows and things like that, where people live off the grid and very appealing, right? And there's something more complete about. I don't know. Maybe it's just television, but I've also met people that live that way, through business and stuff, that are more, out there on the fringe.
Right.
And they seem to be more whole as individuals in a weird way.
No, I totally agree with that perspective for sure.
But if we look at, this is the kind of the perspective I always taken, right? If you just look at the planet and you look at, human beings and consciousness and all this stuff, we're moving in a direction, and you can debate whether that's a good direction or a bad direction, but we're moving in a direction that really has a momentum to it that's not going to, more or less, short of some sort of cataclysm, which is very possible, it's not going to change, right? So
No.
if it's the human evolution, like this might just be a stage in which all this turmoil and all this extremism on the left and the right and all this bullshit that's out there, and this is what's driving people back to kind of this, get back to the roots of, like a hunter-gatherer life, but it's still part of the evolution of the human race. So I always try to take the perspective of, yeah, it might suck at times. Some things are good, some things are bad, but it's the direction we're going. So it's just is what it is. I mean, that's the way we're going, and we're going to end where we're going to end up, whether that is in some, level 1 civilization that conquers space travel and we start, moving out across the solar system, or, I don't think we're going to destroy ourselves.
No,
Because
I
I
don't
think
so.
something's going to destroy. I think something will destroy us before we
long
destroy
before,
ourselves.
Yeah, long before. For
But
sure.
I mean, I don't know.
No, I can pick. I can see what you're saying there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just like I often think about that because technology, and I kind of caught a whiff of this balance, right? That I want to try to like get to. I was talking to you a while back, going through a move, you realize how much crap you have. And I really tried to make a concerted effort to get rid of
Right.
as much stuff as
Junk.
I didn't need.
Yeah.
Right. And just go minimalist, right? As much as possible.
Right.
And I think that there is I think there's this balance that's possible of being like super, no, I wouldn't say super, but to being technologically adapted, but keeping it very simple, right? Keeping it real simple. Because the way my brain works, and I'm sure yours does too a little bit, it's all the different things. And I think technology fits right into this. They cause stress, right? And here's an example. Years ago, got rid of, satellite TV, never watched it, always, ended up like everyone's migrating to the streaming services, more cost effective, more options.
Yeah.
Watch when you want to watch, don't need to watch. So got rid of that. And there was this adjustment phase of not having 150 channels, right? Of nothing, really.
Pretty much.
So got used to that and was like, okay, cool, right? Move into a new condo and, it's all a scam basically, but they require you to buy their media package,
Right.
which is, in my situation, is a cable package that has, I don't know, 150 channels and whatever, but it's still the low end. It's the low end gear. It's the low end, record, or not even recorders, but boxes and stuff.
Still only 4 channels you'll end up watching at the end of the day.
But I'm such kind of like a tech nerd that like I'm having a couple issues, or I want it to do this. I start to get all wrapped up in it. I start to get, now I'm pissed. I want the DVR now, and maybe I should just upgrade to the X1 package. And then I had to step back and go, whoa, dude, like you got along fine without it forever. And why am I sitting here stressing on it forever?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And it's almost like a time waster in that below thought thing, because you sit down and it's like, oh, well, I've got all these channels, so I better use it, I guess, and sit down and flip through them and try to find something.
Right.
What if that just wasn't there?
Yeah.
It'd be so much easier.
Yeah.
So I don't
Plus,
know.
not to mention commercials. I mean, who can go back to watch the
dude.
commercials? Holy
They're
shit.
the worst.
It's made us terrible.
They're the worst.
Yeah.
But commercials are. So what are you saying? Like, you saying that technology has spoiled us?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I
We're
mean-
so impatient with shit now.
Well,
I mean, that kind of comes down to the X1 thing and wanting to get the new gear and so on. It's almost an instant gratification in a way, and we've been spoiled.
But don't you feel like it's better to not have to sit there and be inundated with advertising?
No, for sure. For sure.
But it's
I
made
agree.
us impatient.
But it has. It's made us impatient. For sure. There's no doubt.
But now you get it on other things too, like ads on YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah, which still piss you off. You know how bad you hate them.
Well, it's weird because the majority of longer videos you watch on YouTube don't have interrupting ads. But however their models work and stuff, there are some that do, and you're like, what?
No, the interrupting ads are the worst. Like, whose idea was that? That needs to be drug out.
You'll
back
be
and
running
shot.
or working out
Yeah.
into some motivational music, and all of a sudden there's a commercial for Chantix or something like that, and you're like, it totally messes up.
Root car insurance. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's true.
Throw them at the beginning. That's fine, but
That's true. I don't know. I've been, I say this and then, had issues with the phone and ended up getting a new one and got, of course, the one that's a little bit better model, better, more megapixels, more memory.
upgrade, man. Upgrade world.
Well, I've been
upgrade,
seriously
upgrade.
considering going to a flip phone. I mean, because all the carriers,
You know you'll never go to a flip phone.
I don't know, there's
You're too
something
much of a
about it.
gearhead, tech head to go to a flip phone.
it's more about ease, right? It's
Yeah.
more about ease, but like, I feel like I could do it, but I'd have to let everybody in my life know, hey,
Yeah.
I don't have. First of all, I'm not going to be texting you right back when I gotta, hit a key 3 times just to get to L, right? So there's one thing, but the other thing is not being able to, the ability to not. You don't have to respond to emails, right? Because emails aren't like text. Someone texts you, they expect a response right back.
Right.
Emails aren't the same. The problem is me. An email comes in that catches my attention or needs something to be addressed, and I feel like I need to just get on it right now. And having a smartphone that has that capability is kind of the problem.
It all serves its purpose. I mean, especially in today's world, it all serves its purpose. I think, like they say, variety is the spice of life, or everything in moderation. I think it's all helpful stuff, but it's abused beyond abuse. And it's not even abused, I guess. It's just mind-numbing. It's distraction. How many hours are spent, looking at a phone and people walking with their heads down, scrolling through Facebook, or kids on YouTube.
But do you do that?
No, I make it an intent not to.
I don't even need to make it an intent not to. Like from a business standpoint, that's where I'm engaged, but I don't even do that enough, right? Like posting and stuff like that. But
Right.
it is very rarely that because all people close to me will be like, "Oh, did you see that post?" No. Or why didn't you like that post? Because I don't get on Facebook and
Right.
scroll through stuff that way. Like that. I mean, I'll do that with other things, science news or stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah,
Or podcasts.
podcasts. I mean,
But that's good information.
and it's something you just turn on and leave. You leave. You don't.
Right.
You don't have to be on your phone. I tell you what. I'm starting to. What was great about text messaging is that it took away the phone call. Right. So you could think about your responses. You could formulate whatever and send a text. Great. Worked great. But what I find now is I'm going back to shit, man. Let me just pick up the phone and make a call because. Dude, the constant interruption of a 3-word back and forth conversation,
Right.
I'm realizing how time consuming it is and how inefficient it is,
How much mental energy you spend on it.
dude. It's
Especially
true.
because some people will almost carry 2 different conversations on
I hate that, dude.
at the same time.
I hate
within
that.
a text,
dude.
and it's like,
okay, let's be honest.
oh.
That's what women do.
Yeah, I mean,
Women carry on. They'll say one thing, then say another thing, and then you're
just-
confused at which one.
they'll text a sentence at a time, but 4 in a row, and you're like,
Just send one.
Just put it all
Just
down.
send one. Yeah, please.
and I'll
just send
respond to
one.
all of them in one. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
That's
Well, I'll be sitting at the computer
That's
working
funny.
on something. It's like ding, oh, ding, oh, ding. It's like, I don't, for me, it's like if I'm working on something, especially if it's something design related or whatnot on the computer, like I need a constant, I need a stream. If it's interrupted, I lose that momentum.
right.
It's weird.
No,
don't really know how
I
to
can
explain
totally
it, but
relate to it.
That's why I want to.
Not to mention text. I mean, it is useful for sure, but it comes with its issues, like everything else.
Like tone.
It leaves it open for whether you're being sarcastic in tone, and once those initial snap judgments are made by the receiver, it's
Right.
it already means what it means to that person, regardless of if there's tone there or sarcasm or whatever, and it just opens the door for arguments and just confusion, misunderstandings.
Confusion and misunderstandings.
And this expectation that people put on text messages that you should be responding to it pretty damn quickly because it's a text message.
Yeah.
Like if you got something that important, pick up the phone and call me.
Pick up the phone and call me. And I mean, yeah, we could go on about that forever.
Sure.
I think we even talked about that.
I think a lot of people relate to that too.
Yeah. So people, let's just slow down a minute. Okay. Let's just slow down a minute. What would be cool is if like phones, they only allowed you could respond, but it had to wait another 10 minutes before it could, had to build up energy before it could send the next text.
Yeah.
Just slow it down some. I think that's part of that, it's part of that drive to minimalism and being off the grid from the standpoint of simplifying life.
There's something very appealing about it. I mean, I think it's like they say, not even that I think, I mean, it's been, there's been studies done on it, on our ADHD rates and our autism rates and shit like that, especially ADHD especially with kids, and, suicide rates and that kind of thing is oh, why didn't this person like me? It's a constant anxiety for kids. Why didn't this person like this post or any of that shit? It's constant.
I think it's
for kids.
Not just kids. Dude.
No, it's for adults too, absolutely.
Yeah.
But to see it happen in kids is disheartening.
I feel like, again, I might be the ever optimist. I feel like it's a transitional period in human evolution. Like, honestly, this might be a really stupid thing to say, but you're right. So there's two ways of thinking about like autism, right? Is higher rates of autism, but then people will argue on the other side, we're just recognizing autism differently now, and it's always been the same, right? We're just catching it now. It's like people that for years were dyslexic, back when nobody knew what dyslexic was. People that grew up dyslexic, right? I think that if rates of autism are higher, I think it's evolutionary. I think that it's an evolutionary advantage.
Well, it's like going to a minimalist lifestyle. And I hope this doesn't sound bad to say, but there's something very envious of autism in a way. And I don't know how to explain that, but they're in their world, in their head, right?
Right.
I don't know, and just the way they observe the world and process information and stuff, there's something very intriguing about it in a way.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
I think that's what's intriguing about it, is it's different.
To me, sometimes it seems almost like a higher level of consciousness in a way.
Well, that's what I think too. That's what I'm saying, that it's an evolutionary advantage. That it's it's a stage that you'll see, if it is growing in its percentage of people who have autism, it's because we're evolving into that state for some reason. And I don't know if it's a temporary stage that leads to something else or whatever, but it's interesting though, because, the autistic spectrum is huge, and, I think pretty much any behavior now gets classified with that buzzword it's on the spectrum.
Right.
But it's like the social cues that someone with autism or certain kinds of autism don't pick up and things like that, right? But those things are not, or the anxiety of someone that with autism would have when they're bright lights or crowded room or whatever it is. But you and I both listen to a podcast, not together, but we both heard the same podcast, and I can't remember his name. Maybe you remember it, but the guy, he was a reporter who was kidnapped by Somali pirates.
Oh, right.
On land.
Yeah.
And he was held for 2 years and 8 months.
Yeah.
And you remember when he talked about when he was rescued, or the ransom was finally paid, and he came back, and that being around too many people was overwhelming for him because he couldn't pick up on all the social cues.
Oh, right.
Because spending his time out there, where essentially the definition in his head was that they were the enemy and they were enemies, you know, even though some of them were friendlier to him and stuff like that, but there weren't in deep conversations. It was very at a distance. And so he lost his ability to pick up on social cues because he didn't need to do that.
No, it's survival.
With his captors, right? So as he came back into society, even around friends and things like that, he'd become overwhelmed because he couldn't process all the information. So that kind of sounds like what a lot of autistic people deal with, right? Is that they are not able to pick up on social cues. They're overwhelmed by the stimulus in their environment.
Yep.
So it's like there in all of us, because this guy's a highly educated journalist,
Yeah.
an author. And I just found it really interesting when
Yeah.
he said that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I kind of lean towards that same thing, that it might be some sort of.
Doesn't it almost sound easier at some points that if you didn't have to worry about picking up on social cues?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's all complicated because those are things that allow us to build communities and to, and to, bond with people.
Thrive, yeah.
And thrive
yeah.
and work in cooperation and achieve things too, So, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know people that I wouldn't call autistic that can't pick up a social cue to save their life. You know what I mean? I think we all know people like that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if a professional would say, oh, they're on the spectrum, but that's another thing.
Well, and on the other hand, on the flip side of the coin, like again, it's the ebb and the flow, the positive, the negative. It's got two faces to every coin.
Right.
That there's too many times that's used as for lack of a better term, a crutch or an excuse.
What do you mean though? Oh, to not picking up the social cues?
No. That too quickly we want to label somebody as something.
Oh yeah.
That way.
Well, that's another interesting thing about that podcast. Remember when he was talking about he was rescued and he was traveling from A to Z with FBI agents. They had an FBI psychologist with him.
Oh, right.
And this guy, understanding post-traumatic stress because he had written about it, he had a term. He turned to the psychologist and he said, am I suffering from whatever the term was? And the psychologist said, maybe. And he was like, what? And what do you mean, maybe? And basically the thing is that for a lot of people, like he stated, the brain and the body know how to fix the problem. You just have to give it the space to let it fix the problem. And a lot of times you can create an additional stressor by telling somebody you have this. I don't know the exact word to use, so I'm using the word stressor or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Another phobia or whatever by labeling things. And it's kind of what you were talking about the other day with cancer. It's
That's
like
exactly what I was just thinking.
once you know you have cancer,
once it's been labeled,
it just is a downhill spiral.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle.
There's no question about that. So maybe to that point, just to kind of put a shout out there, since our podcast guests have primarily been family and close friends as of yet, since this is a new podcast, and most of who listen to this are close family and friends, is to kind of give a shout out to our family and Tim and his family, who recently suffered a loss of our cousin.
Yep.
Cousin by marriage, 38, just passed away a few nights ago from an extremely aggressive cancer. I guess the doctor said, her oncologist said, they don't usually see cancer like this in people this young. It's usually something that just came on and then just went like wildfire.
From my understanding.
In a matter of about 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
If that.
If that. So we wish them all the best and all those warm and fuzzy feelings and whatnot. But, it's the same kind of thing. That's how that conversation came up with us.
Yeah.
Is because, once she found out, it seemed to be, now whether that was, I'm not saying that was in her head, obviously.
No.
But you hear stories like that quite often.
You do.
So it's like labeling things at times, because the mind is powerful.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
powerful.
your words have power. I mean, absolute power.
Well, your thoughts have power.
Yeah. Which are all, I wish I had it with me.
Have what?
A little chart I thought of once and remember reading about. You know what? Maybe I can find it. Keep going.
Oh, now you're just leaving me on the mic to.
Yeah. No, I'm right here. Don't worry.
Oh, I thought you left me for a minute.
Still with you. I got you.
Well, what's interesting is is I always trip on this, right? Because why is the power of the mind in some circles so praised, but in other, I wouldn't say circles, but in other definitions, when we talk about things that are mind related, consciousness, awareness, and things like, they are almost poo-pooed.
Give me an example of what you're talking about.
Well, it's like, okay, so, I'm sure a ton of people listening remember when The Secret came out. And everybody was all like, The Secret.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And law of attraction and all this stuff. And then it caught like wildfire. And then, years went by, and years later, people are all like, oh yeah, that's a bunch of hooey. You can't just think your way into a new car or think your way into a bigger house, because that's what people oversimplified and boiled it down to. But that's not really the case, and that's not really what any of that stuff was saying anyway.
No.
So why do we have this tendency, or why do people have this tendency to downplay mental
Capacity, no,
mental
sure.
fortification, mental
Absolutely.
strength? Why?
I don't know why. I don't know if it's ignorance. I don't know if it's self-preservation in a way, because once you accept that as truth, you are now fully accountable to yourself.
Right.
And I think that's the part, and I've struggled with it. Once you know better, like you'll forgive them for they know not what they do. Well, once you do know,
you're held to a higher standard.
You have to
within
be.
yourself.
Absolutely. And I don't think a lot of people can handle that, or be afraid of it.
Right. Or even, I don't know. Everybody knows somebody who can't seem to think outside themselves, can't seem to put themselves in other people's shoes, right? Where everything is about, we all know somebody where everything's about them. Everything, right?
Revolves around them, yeah.
Revolves around them.
For sure.
They can't see a perspective outside of their own. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. I feel, I don't want to sound like, preachy or bashing or whatever, but I don't understand how it is so difficult for some people to step outside themselves, or to be able to consider that someone else's perspective is just as valid as their own.
You're barking up the wrong tree here, bro, because I've fought that battle for years, and I don't get it either. I think people are just so wrapped up in they're so identified with their feelings, which being in tune with your feelings is one thing, but being like fully identified by them to me is another thing. And they're so identified by, well, all I know is how I feel.
Right, but how you feel can be
totally wrong
or not working.
And or delusional or whatever. It could be a misrepresentation of something. Your feelings people accept as truth. And more so what I believe them to be are signposts pointing you, telling your mind, hey, something's off somewhere. Find that thing. And more clues to something bigger than the absolute truth that, I feel this, so this has to be this.
A great rule of thumb, or something to remember, that I came across once a while back was this. Emotions are like a guidance system, okay? If you're feeling negative emotions, it's your body and mind and, say, spirit if you want, it's its way of telling you that that something is off, right?
Yes.
If you're emotionally not feeling well, it's because to make it real simple, that's the essence of you, the spirit of you telling you that there's something off. And so I think a real powerful statement is this statement, right? Even if you don't believe this, just to say it can have, I have found a profound effect. To say, this is how I feel this way, although I realize that may not be what's actually happening, but this is how I feel, right? To be able to, by just verbally saying that, create a space over to the side that says, it may not be what is reality, but right now this is how I'm interpreting it, and this is how I feel about that situation.
You're at least challenging yourself. You're challenging your own thoughts
Right.
to maybe take a different perspective. And I think that's huge. And it kind of reminds me of one of my favorite quotes ever. And I apologize, I don't remember exactly who quoted it, but it's the one that whatever you are feeling is a perfect reflection of what is in the process of becoming.
I like that.
That your power, that the things you give your focus, the thoughts, the attention, the words you use, create the reality around you.
Well, there's what I'm talking about. So I think that's 100% accurate. But you tell that to certain types of people, and they're going to be, that's just hippy dippy hogwash. You know what I'm saying?
Hindsight's a beautiful thing.
I know, but why? What's the harm in thinking
there isn't
that
any harm.
other way?
The harm is
What's
now
the
they're held
effort?
accountable. Now, no, that puts too much on me.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I found that thing I was looking for. It's kind of the wheel, the how to produce certainty wheel in a way. You have a belief.
Right.
That belief leads to some type of potential. That
Right.
potential will then usually lead you to an action of some sort. Even if that's no action. That action will produce a result.
Right.
And then it starts all over. That result will produce a new belief.
Right.
Which will produce a new potential and a new action, and hopefully bigger, better. Small.
But that works both That works both directions.
Absolutely. Positive, negatively, absolutely. Small little thoughts lead to small and little results.
Right.
And the idea is to hopefully build momentum, snowball rolling down the hill type thing
Yeah.
with those.
Well, what's interesting is that it goes back to what we talked about in that previous podcast about like following your kite strings back to see why. Because we're all filled with a bunch of automated responses that we've developed by conditioning, by experiences, by trauma over the years, and that we can think as positively as we want about things and try to create that momentum you're talking about. But if we also don't try to break down the old or cut the old kite strings, or in a scientific term, if we don't try to kind of redevelop new neural pathways about an experience. And what I mean by that is this, right? Anything that you experience, if I say something like, snow, or I say pork chop, your brain fires all kinds of neurons that are connected. And more than likely, single words can spur memories, even if you're not totally conscious of it. But there's this whole kind of neural network of firing synapses that go off when certain things are said.
Most definitely.
And that's a real simple example. But when you start to experience things, or you start to get yourself into situations where they, especially when it's something that was brought on by trauma, we start to react to things. So like, I'll just speak in a personal context here, is having a bunch of what I would just classify in lump sum as really crappy stuff happen over the last X number of years. And then I'm sitting here in current day and I find myself getting irritated at this or irritated at that. It's those undealt with, I guess, emotions or things that are,
It's another signpost.
they're just reaching out.
Yeah.
One has nothing to do with the other
Right.
on a literal basis or a logical basis, but it's just the beast coming out, which is where a ton of addiction comes from and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's that's a pretty cool way of putting it, how you just put it there.
Yeah. It's, and that leads to a kind of another idea mentally as well, that,
Yeah.
it's, sorry, got caught up in my own thoughts there for a moment, just like that. But, you have a certain thought about something, positive, negative, whatever label you want to throw on it, but you have a thought, and that thought inevitably will produce an emotion of some sort. And that emotion will produce a reaction out of you or out of someone else, but usually yourself. And that could be either physical reaction or even a mental reaction.
So, but do you think it's always starts with a thought?
Yeah, I mean,
Because what if something just happens to you, right? Boom, car slams into you. Okay? And that's going to create an emotion, right? And then probably lead to an action.
right. I don't know for sure. I mean, I don't have the answer, but I would think that you're still, the speed of thought. You're still going to have a thought when that car hits you. It's either shit, ow, or it is what it is, which will then produce whatever emotion comes after it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean, those are those cognitive reflexes that you almost have no control over. Those, instinctual responses that have either been conditioned into you throughout the years or whatever. That, when you're hiding, you're hiding around the corner from your buddy, is coming down the hall, and you jump out and scare him.
Oh yeah.
Those instant cognitive reflexes.
Cognitive response. Yeah.
That you almost have no physical control over.
You don't have any physical control over it. It's programmed into you.
It just happens.
It's your fight or flight mechanism.
And everyone's response is different. And so that's where it gets hard to hold anyone accountable for those things, because it is just an instant response to a situation.
Yeah, well, I don't like my cognitive reflex to being scared.
You fall on the ground.
Yeah,
crying.
I fall on the ground and don't cry, but I flail and hit the ground, dude. It's hilarious. And you can't change that cognitive response.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
no. You've got no control over it.
Sometimes. So what are we saying? What are we saying to people here? Are we telling people to change the way they think?
That to which you give your attention creates your reality.
Yeah,
So do it wisely.
But see, that's the thing. You can say that all you want, but that don't.
Well, don't take my word for it.
No, I agree with you.
No.
I agree with you.
Don't take my word for it then.
I'm trying to think of another
But
way.
challenge yourself.
No, trust me.
Try it.
I agree with you, but do people? Those are big words to a lot of people.
For sure. Pick up a book. Even if you don't believe it, pick up a book and read about it. Pick up an Eckhart book. Speaking of which, have you read Silence Speaks?
No.
Me either.
Is it a good book?
I don't know. I'm going to get it next. Sorry.
Because you're a book nerd? You like to read books?
No, I really don't. I like to get information. I like to learn.
Yeah. Like Audible. Like books on tape are awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Books on tape. Books, streaming books, I should say.
Yeah.
I like those. I like to listen to those. I like to read sometimes. I like the tactile sense of reading and then highlighting and marking and stuff like that. But yeah, it's like the problem is with a lot of like literature and books on that kind of stuff is, you could flip through a notebook like you have there, and it's filled with all these inspirational and pivotal things that people said and or have meaning to you at the time or whatever, or you flip back through it and still have meaning to you and stuff like that. But what is the gap? Like, I could sit across from somebody and read off the most powerful inspirational quotes on changing the way you think and doing this and doing that. But it's not about, because I've learned this, right? Because you go on YouTube, it's filled with motivational speeches, these mixed speeches and stuff. And you listen and you're like, oh, wow, that's a pretty powerful thought. Oh, that's a pretty powerful thought. But it's not about listening to that one powerful thought or that one 30-minute video or that one whatever it is. It's about listening to it all the time.
It's a constant practice. Just like you want to get good at anything, any sport, any physical activity. You got to exercise the muscles to do it.
You just let the
constantly
information continue to trickle in.
Yeah. And you practice it along the way. You put it into practice. And it's like watching The Thinker. All those years ago we talked about it. That,
right.
When you first try it out, that, it takes you 20 minutes to go, oh shit, I should have been watching Thinker. And then, a month
right.
later you get down to 5
there's-
minutes, and that gap shortens until it almost becomes second nature.
There's a good point, because we brought it up a couple times in this podcast, and it's probably one of the most, I think it's because it was one of the first for me personally, it was probably one of the most sense-making things about being, about consciousness, is watching the thinker. So let's explain that really quick. So this is watching the thinker. Watching the thinker is the concept that your thinking mind, like we talked about earlier, is this thing that's always running and it's going and it's doing its thing. Okay? And there is, watching the thinker is that there is a state of, I call it essence, spirit, being, that is above that. That is the observer of the thinker. So make it real literal. Think about your brain. Okay, and think about this little dot that sits.
It's like an out-of-body experience.
Right.
It's above, just kind of
outside
watching
of you and watching
what's happening.
So watching the thinker in practice is this. It's a simple concept, but can have, once you start to do it more often, can have pretty amazing results. And it's not something you just figure out and I got it for life. It's constantly ebbs and flows. So this is it. When you have a situation arise, okay, where you're reacting to a situation. Let's say you're at work and a coworker does something or says something and you lash out and you say something, okay? So a day might go by. And you reflect on the event and you go, man, I shouldn't have reacted that way, or I shouldn't have said that. And I think we've all been there. Well, that's watching the thinker. You're watching the thinker a day later, a week later, a month later, whatever it is. Keep doing that. Mm-hmm. Keep reevaluating what happens, and you'll find the time between the event and you watching the thought process you went through shorten and shorten and shorten, to where pretty soon you might be driving in your car and someone does something and you're like, you asshole, right? And then you say the words you asshole and a minute rolls by and you go, God, really, I don't know why he was in a rush. That could have been an emergency or whatever.
Right.
So the gap between watching the thinker just decreased. Then what happens is the magic part. Okay. And I will just give an anecdotal story of the first time I really experienced this. Mm-hmm. I was at work and I had been practicing this. I had been trying to shorten that gap in watching the thinker. And it goes right back to the think before you act.
Right.
Right. So I'm watching the thinker is on my mind constantly. And in the gaps between my response to a situation and watching the thinker starts to decrease and decrease. And then I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of people at work, and my boss and a good friend of mine was complaining or bringing up a point about something that did or did not get done, and it was directed towards me. And as he's speaking, which often happens with people, is when people start to say certain things, it triggers something in us, mm-hmm. and all we start to do is formulate the response, and we stop listening.
Yep.
Right. So in this experience, it was seriously like a weird micro psychedelic experience. He's going off, and it's triggering anger in me.
Right.
Like how dare you?
Right.
Right. And as that emotion is rising in me, I literally felt it like coming up from the ground. The watcher came in and all of a sudden just observed what I was doing. It observed the process of my emotions taking control, and it instantly just solved it. Or didn't solve it, but it instantly
kind of neutralized it.
Right. So he finished saying what he was saying, and I can't even remember how I responded, but I did not respond emotionally.
Right.
Right. And I like to call it mental Aikido, right? In a way, you're like blending with that attack, if you want to call it an attack, right? Meaning a verbal attack from him.
No, for sure, absolutely.
But that's the concept of watching the thinker, is that, and I'll tell you what.
I bet you felt 100 times better.
Oh, dude,
reacting in such a fashion than trying to defend your position.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
The growth opportunity
to be able just to let someone's opinion, just or not just, in this context, personally come at you and not have it affect you in a negatively emotional way is extremely strange feeling.
I think that's part of, not society, or I think that's part of just, something we all struggle with. Part of our own problems is we tend to take everything pretty personal. People take shit personal, when it ultimately has nothing to do with you. But then that creates a response and a defense, and it's just a never-ending cycle.
It's the illusion of disconnect with people, right? We forget that so this is the thing, on a real simple level, we're like a bunch of children. We have reactions to things and take them personally, right? Because we are who we are and we have all these complexities about us, but we just as easily forget that person is the exact same kind of complex being.
Right.
And 90% of what they say about something has nothing to do with the something, but has to do with years of conditioning or trauma or whatever it is, or their own shit that they're going through and stuff like that.
For sure.
But yeah, and I'll tell you what, even if you never experience watching the thinker in the moment, right, where as it's happening, you're observing what's happening. And it is really kind of, I've never had what I would call an out-of-body experience in the traditional term or in the traditional sense, but that's what it is described like. It's like just for that brief moment, you're like, oh, this is happening. Oh, there's this time dilation that's going on, and I can see myself respond. I can see the thinker, my brain, the ego, right? Because that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's your ego reacting to this, and you can have control over it. You can quiet it down.
And it's so empowering.
Yeah, and it's not like, this is really important in my mind. It's not that you are turning off the ego.
No.
You're nurturing it.
You let it flow, you let it go.
You cradle it like it's a little baby
Right.
that's crying, and you go, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like that. But the point I keep trying to get to is that even if you never experience it in the moment, if you can decrease the time frame, because here's the thing, a lot of times we say stupid things to people, or people say stupid things to us, and they don't ever give it a second thought. I know people personally that are close to me in my life, or used to be close to me in my life, that will say something or have an opinion about something, and time will go on, and I guarantee they'll never have a second thought about what they said or how they said it, right? But if you can decrease the time, even if it's like 5 minutes later, like I literally started to look at it like time, like, oh man, I'm at a minute.
Right.
I'm at a minute before I think about what I said and go, oh,
Right.
I shouldn't have done that. I should, so it's like you do and then analyze, and pretty soon you can do and analyze at the same time, and then pretty soon you can analyze before you do. Mm-hmm. So,
and the more emotionally involved or attached you are to a certain situation, the harder it can be.
Of course,
because those strings are so much tougher and thicker. But I think, if you made it a practice, like you say, even if you never truly experience it in the moment, you still reap benefits from it.
Yeah,
by a long shot.
100%. Yeah, you're right.
And you'll fall and you'll stumble, and they'll go through a period of time where you forget to watch the thinker or whatever, but come back to it and keep practicing.
Here's the thing. The biggest mistake is to think you got it figured out. So when you figure this out, you don't got shit figured out.
Yeah.
To think, and this is the thing, right? So we at times would call this awareness training, I guess, which is just this kind of phase that we started to go through years and years ago about, watching the thinker and these just concepts of trying to just enlighten yourself, right? And keep in mind that the definition of enlightenment is to shine light on the dark. Okay, so there's this really interesting. I experienced this. I started reading all kinds of books about ego and essence and being and all this stuff.
Sure.
And learning a ton of stuff and going, oh yeah, this, oh yeah, that, and what happens is your ego creeps back in the back door,
Yep.
and you think you've got things figured out,
Yep.
and you elevate yourself above other people, and you go, oh, they just don't understand watching the thinker. They don't understand what their emotions or their being is doing. They don't understand the kite strings that are driving them. So the biggest thing you can do, the best thing you can do, is to realize you don't know shit. Even when you think you figured shit out.
Humility and
It's
be
humility.
humble.
But you can even be humble in your ego.
Oh, for sure.
'Cause
The ego's
there's-
a sneaky mother effer.
Yeah. That's why that's why you nurture it. That's why you acknowledge it and go, all right, I hear what you're saying. Because it is a part of you, and you cannot remove
It's like
it from you.
Yoda, resistance is futile, because it really is. You're only strengthening it.
That's Star Trek.
Oh, was it?
The Borg. Resistance is futile.
Are you sure?
Oh, I know my Star Trek.
I know you do, nerd. No, you do.
But no, it's true. It's true. Like, I don't know. It's a real tricky thing, because what will happen is that the people that you're close to. So listen, if you're a person out there and you, let's say you want to improve on your state of being, the thing about watching The Thinker and what you were saying, right, about the distance between when your actions happen and when your thoughts happen and all this stuff, it's no different on a thought process level than it is on a physical
Same thing.
being level, right? They say that people that are physically fit that are in car accidents get injured less, and it's not because they can withstand what's happening. It's that they're more in tune with their body, and so they can react quicker to the situation on a microsecond level, where they can just react quicker, so they're less likely to break things and do so. It's the same thing.
It's like I think I mentioned it last podcast or a couple of podcasts ago. Healthy body, healthy mind. Strengthen your body, strengthen your mind. They are connected in every sense of the word.
Right.
And it's like when you are depressed, that's why get out, exercise.
So hard.
A healthy, it is. To find the motivation is tough. That's the hard part, is the motivation side of it. But do it. Try and do it.
Well, that's because those, I mean, obviously the known benefits and the endorphins that get released, there ain't, the serotonin that gets released when you exercise and when you push yourself. Look,
Start small. You don't gotta go, down to the gym and press weights until your body's sore.
No.
Go for a walk,
dude.
Start something.
Do 10 push-ups every day, and then when you can do those 10 push-ups easy, do 15 push-ups. I can't remember where I heard this, but I was like, dude, that's brilliant. Don't set a goal that's hard to reach. Set a goal that's easy to reach, okay? So let's say, I'll use the idea of push-ups, okay? I hate push-ups, and I'm not very good at them. And 2 years ago, I'd struggle to do 10 push-ups, right? And I can't remember where I heard it, but it made so much sense, because I'd always 10 push-ups. No. Set your goal at 5 push-ups. Make your goal achievable.
Yeah.
So that you get in the habit of achieving your goal.
Yeah.
Huge. It's a huge thing.
And it's a huge motivator.
Huge motivator.
At that point.
All of a sudden 15. All of a sudden 20. Oh shit. Okay. Yeah, 20. I'll go to 25. I'll go to whatever.
You reverse engineer, if you can, and you have them, your goal. Big goal, medium-sized goal, whatever it might be, graduate school, graduate college, whatever it is. There's your goal. Now, reverse engineer it. Well, to get there, these are these tiny-ass little steps all along the way I'm going to need to take. Well, now you've just found your first baby step.
Right.
And it's the same thing. Start small. Start with those tiny, tiny steps.
Right.
And
throw out the steps that don't help you achieve your goal.
Yeah.
I can't remember the process or whatever, but I will use this when I'm trying to ultra focus on things that are work and business related, which is I do it weekly. You can do it daily, you can do it monthly, but I do it weekly, which is I have a piece of paper that's a laid out piece of paper that's got different categories. Okay. And this is for business, but you can do this in your personal life too, or have one that's a little bit of both. For work stuff, I have in my case, a column that's production, and it's just got a bunch of empty check mark boxes and lines. Okay. Production tasks, sales tasks, business tasks, research and development tasks, right? And then like miscellaneous. And on Monday, I will go through and get organized, and I will list out in all, that one falls in this category, that goes in business, that goes in marketing, that goes in sales, right? And then take all those tasks. That's not good enough. Just having a task list, too many task lists can make you inefficient, I believe. And then what you do is you go and you look at, okay, what are the what is the one thing I need to make sure gets accomplished this week, or the two things, okay? And then what you do is you write out that goal. I need to hit this number in sales dollars this week. So then go back to your task list and take all the things and transfer them to underneath
That'll help you
one
get
goal.
there.
That will help you get there.
And the rest is
And
junk.
let the other ones, they're not necessarily junk, but they're just not the priority.
Right.
Because if what it does is it helps you focus a little bit more. So but that's the same kind of thing, whether it's with work or personal life, or it is with business.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to find that balance. And I think that, would you agree with this? I think that this is my personal experience, and everyone's wired differently. And I think that some people are good at compartmentalizing life and stressors. But for me, the most important is home. What I classify as home life, right? So that might be your relationship with someone that you're married to, or you're living with, or it might be the relationship with your children. But if things are good at home, there's a solid base there. I can handle the stress of anything outside of that.
I'm right there.
Work
with
related,
you, man.
dude.
I'm
Something
right there
goes
with
wrong
you.
at work, but if stuff is shitty at home, and then the littlest thing goes wrong at work, it's like for me. It totally is paralytic. I can't do this. I
No,
gotta go. I can't handle this.
I am 100% with you. If that foundation has any wear marks, or I mean, not wear marks, but at the moment is in shambles, yeah, I don't compartmentalize, and I don't process it. Everything else is just amplified by that much more. But
Right.
other than that, I like to consider myself really good at compartmentalizing, especially with work, and
Yeah.
that's, I guess it could be a bad thing when you're in a relationship, because it's, well, why don't you ever talk about it? Well, because I've handled it already.
Right.
I've set it aside. It's not something I want to keep carrying around at the moment.
Right. Well, let's not beat around the bush. It was because if we're talking relationships, because everything's a relationship, but let's talk the relationship of marriage, or man and woman, or man and man, or whatever your flavor is, right? Is that it is important, I think, to let that significant other person know, if you have that other person, and there might be ups and downs, which there always is, and stuff like that, is having an understanding of how important the base is, the home base is.
Yeah.
That if things are good here, then other things can be handled more easily. It's like if you're in a relationship where things are not going well, and then you run into some sort of financial hiccup, loss of job, or decrease in wage, it will just ricochet back onto your home life, But honestly, it's like, look, if we're good here, I can handle anything that's on the outside. But when you say you're good at compartmentalizing, I had a friend of mine tell me this analogy one time, which I think is very true, and I think it's not, one's not better or worse, it's just different. And I agreed with this statement. He said that men and women generally speaking, the way we process things is a little different. And he said, look at it as a dresser full of drawers. Okay. Men tend to compartmentalize things. They have their work drawer, they have their relationship drawer, they have their family drawer, their friend drawer. Okay. And so it's easier, and one would argue it's easier because men are more simple-minded, right? We're more of the caveman thinking. It's easier for us to process the world that way, by compartmentalizing things, which gets us into trouble in relationships, because we don't necessarily tie one thing to the other because we compartmentalize things.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Where women's drawer is, they've got a dresser full of drawers, but all their stuff's in one drawer. Relationship, it's a junk drawer.
Yeah.
I know I sound like I'm bashing on women, but I think that just by nature of a woman's evolutionary design to be nurturing and to be the caregiver and stuff like that, as far as from an evolutionary standpoint, right, is that things are more connected. The things don't have as clear definition of lines.
Right.
They're more emotionally connected, for good reason. So, kind of understanding that, because that's...
Well, it's the same way they tend to think, with thought process and stuff, it's a lot of read between the lines, because it is all just kind of meshed in there together, and
Right.
pulling, for us compartmentalizers, pulling that information out of those correct drawers instead of rummaging through a drawer full of it all,
Right.
looking for that AAA battery that is in there somewhere.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, because it makes sense, right? That drawer that's got everything in it is open, and they know that the AAA battery, to use your expression, is next to the sticky note that says, go to the doctor or whatever. So they have that relationship, the battery and the sticky note already
Organized
have that
chaos.
relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I'm sure you've run into it. I've run into it a lot. Is, in having relationship struggles, it's like you'll be maybe discussing or engaged in a certain topic or event or situation, and then for me personally, it's hard all of a sudden when a gear gets spun, by the significant other, and all of a sudden they're talking about something different.
Yeah.
And my brain sometimes goes, I feel like an idiot, because I'm like, I think that she's still talking about the thing we were just engaged in.
Right.
But for her, there's a direct correlation to that other thing via
Where
some
for
sort of
you-
emotion. For me, it's like, wait, what? Oh, I need to think about that for a minute. Hold on a minute. I feel like that's why I say the wrong thing at the wrong time all the time.
Yeah.
Because I'm not as quick to make the correlation from one
Yeah.
thing that's more connected to her to the other thing than I am. That's about as clear as mud.
No, it is. But I think a lot of people understand it without having to need much explanation, because I think it is a pretty fundamental personality trait in most people, male versus female. Right. I mean, that's just the way it is and has been, evolutionarily speaking, for millennia.
Right now, people we know that are listening to this, women we know, are going, you guys are fucking idiots. Just two dudes sitting with some microphones in front of them thinking they know what they're talking about. I guarantee you. The only way this conversation could be balanced is if we had a female in here to give their opinion. So if we said anything that was offensive or perceived to not be true, it's just because we compartmentalize things different in different drawers.
That's true. Come on in and let's have a discussion.
Let's have a discussion, because that's what we do here. We enter as strangers and leave as friends. Anything else you want to talk about?
No. I got nothing.
Yeah. So again, we're going to continue to do these kind of interim podcasts where we just ramble and rant and go on about this or that. We should have some cool podcasts coming up and some more cool guests coming up. So stay tuned for that. And like we always mentioned before, if you have any suggestions or if you want to be on the podcast yourself, just give us a call, a text, a message, whatever it is, get a hold of us. So that's it.
Peace.